So maybe the best thing to do is just take a step back and have a look at what we're experiencing right now and what are some of the headline statistics that are coming out from the coronavirus pandemic. And as the sentiment starts to change a little, what are some of the underlying statistics? So there's just a few bits and pieces which I've scanned over the last couple of weeks that I thought were really prevalent and really worthwhile noting. The first one being that in Australia, obviously the unemployment rate's being really hurt. But of that, it's really, the pain is being felt in the 15 to 24-year-old bracket the most. So if we look at, April, there was a 10% increase in unemployment in that age bracket alone. Whereas for 25-year-olds and above, there was only a 3% decrease in April. So there's definitely some differences there. Another one being that I think it's about 15% of actually all job losses are being experienced in that 15 to 24-year-old age bracket. So why is that important? Well, I think it's important because these are people entering the workforce for the first time. So the reality that they're going to experience is very different than reality of earlier generations. And I hope that doesn't have a carry-on effect, because what we usually find is that the younger demographic are the early adopters. They're the early adopters of technology, of IT, of changes that come. Now, changes usually come as a result of necessity. So usually when you see some big pandemic like this, or you see a world war, or you see a real mass movement of human behavior, there is change, really fantastic change. Now, the early adopters of that change are usually the younger demographic. So what I'm really hoping is that the dent that we see in the employment of those younger generation, of the 15s to 24-year-olds, doesn't impact their take-up, the early adoption of these continued changes that we see in technology and in IT and infrastructure, in property and finance, in cars, that will no doubt come as a result of the coronavirus. So what are some of the other things we're seeing? Well, the World Bank right now is got a $160 billion reserve fund that it's basically happy to use at very low interest rates to support some real devastating impacts to the safe and healthy of 600 million people. So what their expectations are right now is that about 600 million people will be devastatingly affected by the coronavirus in terms of health, in terms of nutrition, in terms of joblessness. And already 70% of the world's population has tapped into that. So 100 countries has already tapped into that World Bank offering. And those 100 countries account for just on 70% of the world's population. So you can see there that the impacts are widespread. They're really widespread. So where does Australia sit in all this? Well, it's a really good question. And Australia geographically has a real advantage, I believe, in that it's an island. It has the ability to protect its borders. And while there could be an economic impact of that, I think that the safety and the health of its population will be the winner of maintaining border control for longer. And just the seamlessness with which it can maintain its borders will be to Australia's absolute benefit. You might even see some real arbitrage there where the economy can be insulated. The Australian economy can be somewhat insulated so that it can gather momentum. It can gather momentum without the impact from outside parties with outside countries to a certain degree. Obviously, if we do close our borders, there are some losers to that. Obviously, trade gets impacted, and like a real obvious casualty is our fourth biggest export, Australia's fourth biggest export, which is education services. So that'll be an impact. That'll be a real impact to the Australian economy, where the number of overseas students will significantly drop if we do protect our borders. So it'll be a trade-off there. But I think the net gain is that Australia can. And there's a really good parable that the boy that can't read is no worse off than the boy that doesn't read. And the fact that Australia has the ability to close its borders, I think, is a real benefit. Whether it does or not is a whole nother thing. But at least it's got that draw card there.